This is Christian Owens, founder of GenderSpace, and you are listening to the Academy's Developing Practice podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Academy's Developing Practice podcast. In this episode, we chat with Christian Owens, founder of GenderSpace, about transgender awareness and inclusion. Listeners should be aware that there is sensitive content shared during the podcast with references to suicide. If any listeners feel personally affected, links to support services can be found in the show notes.
Christian, we're really pleased to be talking to you today. Thanks so much for joining us. Before we start, we always like to get to know our guests. So it'd be great if you could just tell us a little bit about your background and how you've arrived at the position you're in today as the founder of GenderSpace.
Yes, hello, I'm Christian Owens and I'm the founder of GenderSpace, which is my public speaking business. So I work as a transgender public speaker. And before I started GenderSpace, I served for just under 27 years for Merseyside Police and retired only recently as a detective sergeant, June last year. And before, I suppose, I joined the police, my early years were spent growing up in Runcorn in Cheshire. So I was born into a practicing Catholic family. And from my early years, always, I suppose, questioned my gender identity and was very aware of how I identified from a young age, really. I went on through secondary school where things became a little bit difficult for me with regards to my identity, including sexuality. And then joining the police, obviously encountered some difficulties, I suppose, with a lack of inclusion. And then it was quite a long time after that when I first acknowledged my journey of transition, which has taken probably the best part of a decade to complete. And a lot of that journey really inspired me to do what I'm doing today as GenderSpace, to educate other people and hopefully inspire other people as well about the journey of transition.
Fantastic. So from what you're saying, you were questioning your gender from a very early age. Were there people in your life that you were able to have those conversations with? I'm being selfish now as a mum of two children. You know, I want to be open and to have those kind of conversations with them and their friends, and for it to be a normal kind of conversation. Were there people in your life that you felt you could explore that with as a child and a teenager?
I think for me it was difficult because I was born in 1971, so grew up in the 70s and 80s, went to school during that time, and also being part of a Catholic household and family. It was difficult to find somebody to talk to. And although I had a very close relationship, I've got a twin sister, so always had a constant companion going through school. But back then we just didn't talk about things like sexuality and gender identity. So it became increasingly difficult for me to be open about those feelings and experiences that I was having. I did have a positive experience with a teacher at school who did notice that I was struggling a little bit and actually asked me, you know, what's wrong? Do you want to talk about it? And that was the beginning, I think, of my journey, really, of exploration when I was 16, 17 years of age.
Fantastic. And it's so important to have those conversations, isn't it? Which is what we're hoping to do today. So we're really keen to talk to you about transgender awareness and inclusion and learn more from your experiences. So from the start, for all of our benefit, would you mind sharing for us briefly a definition of trans and transgender, please?
Yes, certainly. So trans or transgender, both appropriate terms to use. But it is an umbrella term that captures the many ways, I suppose, that a person sees their gender identity in comparison to their sex assigned at birth. So for some people like me, their sex assigned at birth, in my case, that was female. differs to how they identify with their gender and how they engage with their gender. But it is an umbrella term, and it's used to describe the very many identities of people. So some people may identify with their birth gender, they may feel fluid between the two and be comfortable with that, or they may feel that there is a difference. And for me, there certainly was a difference, because like I just said, from an early age, I identified with being a male and I felt comfortable with that identity as well.
Christian, so before you set up GenderSpace, you've mentioned in the introduction that you spent 27 years in the police force as a detective sergeant. What were some of the key things that you learned from your time in that role that now supports the work that you do through GenderSpace?
I think there's a lot that I took from my career in policing after such a long time. And although it was a difficult journey at times identifying as somebody who is trans, I also identify as gay as well. So although there were difficulties, what I've taken from the journey is definitely the importance and the need for diversity and inclusion within a workplace, and also the importance of representation. So representation within that organisation, so that we do truly reflect not just people internally, but also externally as well. I think identity and authenticity is something that I've taken from it. So definitely that feeling of always being yourself at all times, and how that can really positively impact on your life when you are truly being who you are. And I think as well, what I've taken from it, which helps me now, not just with GenderSpace, but in life in general, is a sense of strength and resilience in really owning who I am and owning my identity completely, which enables me to really empathise and connect with people, which is now leading me down a pathway of supporting people and educating people as well.
Brilliant. I mean, it must have been a very interesting yet difficult, I would imagine, role to be in. So, I mean, I can't imagine how it would be like in an organisation which didn't have so many, stereotypical sort of attributes as a police force. Was it particularly difficult?
It was difficult, and I'm always very open about that, because I think that's how we learn and educate ourselves and make things better in the future. So for me, it was very difficult, and what that resulted in was, for many, many years, in fact, I served for 18 years in the police service, without acknowledging who I really was and becoming my true identity. So such a long time going to work every day, not as yourself, and not truly being you every day. And that for me was really difficult, because, as I've explained, I knew who I was from a very young age. I just felt that because of a lack of inclusivity, and this is not a criticism of the police service, because like many organisations during that time, there was a lack of inclusivity, there was a lack of representation. I found it difficult to find other people like me, other role models, other people who were going through the same journey. And so as a result of that, I tried to block it out, and I tried to hide, and I tried to pretend to be somebody else, and I just tried to conform in the best way that I possibly could.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Nobody was talking about it in the 90s either. So, I mean, there's 30 years there, isn't there, from 71 onwards. How quickly has that changed? Are you seeing a change in the last decade, in the last 20 years, where people are having these conversations more?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm a really positive person, and I like to think that we're making progress all the time. Certainly for me, I had to be very patient because of when I was born, when I grew up, when I joined the police. So I joined the police in 1994, and it was such a long time, I felt, before I started to see inclusivity and diversity. but certainly in the last 10 years. So it took me pretty much 10 years to transition. And from starting transition in 2012 legally and leaving the police service last year, I saw such a huge amount of progress. And progress in society, I think, as well. Much more positive, visible representation, so many more voices that are being heard, platforms like this that are providing an opportunity for people to speak out and reach out as well, to say to people, look, it's okay, you can be who you are. There are other people like you. And that's probably the biggest reason why I created GenderSpace. It was to reach out to people, to be very visible, and to say, it's okay, you can be who you are. And once you become your true self, life is so much more positive and enjoyable as well.
I wonder if some of this is the kind of next generation as well. We had a really interesting conversation. So my sister has teenagers and I have teenagers, and we were at my mum's the other day. And my sister and I just sat back, and the teenagers were educating my parents, who are, you know, almost in their 70s, around pronouns. And all the teenagers go to single-sex schools, but they have children in their class who use different pronouns to them. And they were trying to explain this to my mum and dad, who are of that generation where they don't understand that they have no concept, but they do want to learn, to be fair to my parents. But it's really good that, you know, my children and my sister's children were like, no, Gigi, these are the pronouns we use for this person, and they're different to my pronouns. And I wonder if it's, you know, the next generation having these really important conversations. So like you say, Matt, growing up, we never talked about transgender, but actually our children are talking about transgender as part of, you know, the normal conversation.
No, definitely, because as part of my work with GenderSpace now, it's predominantly based within education, so
Okay.
high schools, as well as universities and colleges. And it's so refreshing when I go in to deliver school assemblies to, you know, through from year 7 to year 13, and to have young people come up to me and introduce themselves. And quite often they introduce themselves using their pronouns before their name. Mm-hmm. And I do really think that it is this positive representation and a real empowerment that they have. You know, they love who they are, they embrace who they are, they're proud of their identities, and they want people to know. And they're now educating their teachers, for example, at school. You know, the education is coming from the young people, which is so positive.
Fantastic. So tell us a bit more about GenderSpace and your key priorities for the organisation.
Yeah, so when I set up GenderSpace, I was actually sat at home here, actually recovering from surgery. So one of the many surgical procedures I've been through to get to where I am today. And I was unable to do very little because of recovery. So I decided to set up my website and thought about what I was going to call the business and what I really wanted to achieve. And so I picked the name GenderSpace because I wanted to create a safe space to talk about gender and gender identity and sexuality, and to really kind of help audiences to understand what that journey is like, but make that a really safe space to do so people could ask me questions about my journey and what the experiences have been like. And the strapline that I used for GenderSpace was discover, enlighten and inspire. So my key priorities are to use my own personal journey of discovery to enlighten and educate people about the subject, but to do that from a point of lived experience, because for me, lived experience is so powerful and it gives people a true insight into the journey that people are on in life. It's so powerful to be able to hear that authentic life journey from somebody who's actually living it every day. And I suppose that the last part of my strapline is inspire. I wanted to inspire people that are maybe on the same journey as me. So people that are embarking on that journey, are thinking about that journey, or maybe parents and carers of people that are on that journey, siblings, because for me, personally, on my journey, my family found it difficult. My siblings found it difficult. My parents certainly found it difficult to start the conversation. So I just wanted to reach out to people to give them that inspirational, motivational insight into this journey, that yes, there are going to be ups and downs. There might be difficult times, but actually with the right support around you, with the right education, it will be okay.
Yeah, and you mentioned before, Christian, you said that it took 10 years, did it, for the transition? That's such a long time. Is that typical?
Yeah, I always talk about it because I think it's important for people to have that insight into the journey. Now, the journey can be very different because trans and non-binary people are very diverse people, as we all are in society. And so the journey is very unique to you, and that's very much dependent upon the legal pathway, the medical care pathway, and the journey that you actually embark on, really. So for me, I've gone through full medical transition from beginning to end, including full surgical transition. So I actually first presented at the GP in 2011, which is quite typical. That first contact is usually made within that medical setting. And from there, you are referred, depending on the journey you're undertaking. And for me, I then started to meet the blockages of the gender identity services waiting lists. So for me personally, it took me 2 years to reach Leeds Gender Identity Service before I even got to speak to a gender specialist. And from there, I suppose the journey began. And because I've been through 5 surgical processes with lots of recovery time in between, it's taken pretty much a decade
Wow.
through. Yeah. And some of that was spent socially transitioning. So before any medical intervention. And I think it's really important to mention that not all trans people do go through a medical or surgical transition. It might just be a social transition and then it stops there for whatever reason. So I actually lived socially before any kind of medical intervention for about 3 years.
Right. I mean, I'm fascinated with that journey, as you've put it. I'm fascinated with that 10 years. You must, when you said there's highs and lows, it must have felt like you're on a roller coaster. I guess it's not just the medical aspect of it, though. It must be the psychological aspect of going through that. Did you have to go through psychological type questioning as well as part of that journey?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because during my time going through the care pathway, it actually changed from a psychiatric care pathway to a psychological care pathway. So when I started my journey through psychiatric assessments, and obviously that takes a lot of time as well, to speak to people to make sure the necessary support's in place. And then I also went through psychological assessments as well. So I think that is probably the main reason, including waiting times, why it does take such a long time and why so much support is necessary as well.
We've touched on language as well in a conversation, and the use of pronouns, which helps create a more inclusive environment. And obviously, this is something that you cover, don't you, Christian, in the workshops that you deliver. So I was just wondering, what kind of advice would you give to people who might feel a little anxious about maybe using the wrong wording or potentially causing any offence with the language and pronouns? What would you say to them?
I think it's really important to talk about terminology and language, because personally, for me, it was probably the biggest blockage and barrier that I faced during transition and still face to some degree today. And that was mainly as a result of people being afraid to talk to me, to being afraid to start conversations with me, not because they didn't want to, not because they disliked me as a person, but just because they were afraid of getting it wrong. And that's really inspired me to concentrate a lot of my time on terminology and language so that people feel more comfortable around the subject and feel more comfortable to just talk to people. And it's as simple as that sometimes. It's just about having a conversation with somebody, because if we don't talk and we don't include people, it results in isolation, it results in loneliness. And for me, for quite a few years at the beginning, because people were afraid of getting it wrong, I became quite isolated. It felt really lonely, that people that I'd known for many, many years just didn't speak to me anymore. And it can be quite upsetting for us to experience that. So my advice is to be as educated and informed as you can be around terminology and language, but also to accept that you're not going to know everything and you're not going to always get it right as well. And that's okay, because we all make mistakes in life. It's about how you deal with that mistake then. And it might take a little bit of a recovery. It may need an apology. But most importantly, it's about acknowledging your vulnerability around terminology and language, even if that is to say, look, I don't really know a lot about this subject. I'm a bit worried about getting it wrong. So if I do, I'm sorry, but I'd really like to talk to you and start that conversation. So I think there is going to be some anxiety around terminology because it's evolving all the time as well. It's changing all the time. But I think the best course of action is just be informed, be educated as much as you can be, but also accept that you may get it wrong as well.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Thanks, Christian. I've just noticed we're recording this in Teams, and I've just noticed you've got in brackets he/him after your name on the screen there. So is that something that you advocate as well through like these methods, through Teams and Zoom, on emails? Do you advocate that we put because I don't have pronouns on my emails, and maybe I don't know why I don't. Should I have pronouns on my emails?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a really good question because it fits in with terminology and language. Pronouns are so important to trans and non-binary people, because pronouns, they help us to identify ourselves to the rest of society. And quite often that can be at times when we don't always feel like we're presenting fully in the way that we need to be presenting or want to be presenting. And that might be because medical intervention hasn't kicked in fully yet, or it might be that somebody is presenting as fluid or non-binary. And to be able to introduce yourself, or just put it on an email or put it on a meeting like today, to say my pronouns are he and him, it's a clear message that I'm giving that I'm male, I identify as male, and these are the pronouns that I use. And it feels really empowering. It certainly does for me. And I think during the early days, if pronouns would have been used more like they are today, for me, it would have helped my transition a lot, because I used to walk into meetings at work. So back in 2012, when people still did mistake me for being a woman when I was living fully and legally as a man. And I think if I'd have been able to walk into a meeting and just say, hi, my name's Christian and my pronouns are he and him, it would have reduced a lot of my anxiety. But I also think that for pronouns to be used by people who are not trans or non-binary, it just creates so much inclusivity. It makes us feel as people that you have got a level of understanding and knowledge about our journey by using pronouns.
Brilliant. Thanks, Christian. That's really helpful. So one conversation we've been having is, if someone doesn't identify as a she or a he, what's the singular for that pronoun? Is it still they?
Yeah, so many non-binary people or gender fluid people will use they, them pronouns. So a pronoun that is more gender neutral, they may feel comfortable using that, or maybe a combination of pronouns sometimes. So people will use she, they, or he, they. So it's just about us being more aware of pronouns and how people are using them now, and it might not just be restricted to one. But my kind of advice, usually with pronouns, particularly with non-binary, gender fluid people, is, if you're not sure, then use a gender neutral pronoun such as they. It might just help a situation and make it more comfortable for people.
Fantastic. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Is having the conversation and trying to make people feel as comfortable as possible. And actually, I think previously having the conversation would maybe make us feel uncomfortable, but actually that's the way to make people feel secure and included, is having those conversations. So transgender awareness and inclusion is a real focus for us as an institution. Could you give us some ideas in terms of what our key priorities should be to embed our practices in higher education to support inclusion?
Yeah, I think key priorities for inclusion should be the same throughout all organisations. And I think being very visible and vocal about inclusivity is really, really important. There's no point with having priorities around inclusion if we don't talk about them, or if we don't advertise them and publicise them positively. So I think it's really important to have that message heard across the university. I think growth mindset is really important, particularly with leadership within an organisation, and really about being confident enough to acknowledge that we do make mistakes, but it's how we learn from those mistakes. So it's about learning from failure as well as success, I suppose. I think continuing professional development is really key. So it's important that education and that rolling programme continues around inclusion and diversity. And I also think that really utilising the people that you have in your organisation and seeing people as an asset to create and drive inclusion as well, because people are so diverse. There's so many qualities that we've got to offer. So it's really about valuing people and giving people a sense of belonging as well within your organisation. I've mentioned it already, but I definitely feel positive representation is key to inclusion. We've got to represent not just our internal community in an organisation, but also our external communities as well. It makes us more attractive as an employer. Certainly as a trans and a non-binary person, we would look to do some research about education, about an employer, and we want to see that positive representation within an organisation.
Thanks, Christian. And this podcast is called the Developing Practice Podcast, and we like to finish it in each way, where we have the guests just give us 3 or 4 take-home tips that the listeners could reflect on in terms of their own practice and being trans inclusive. So if you do have a few thoughts or tips for the listeners to reflect on, what would they be?
I think definitely something that we've already touched on in the podcast, which is gender inclusive language and pronouns that can really help just talking to people and starting conversations. I think challenging discrimination and behaviour within any organisation is really important, and something that helps that, and certainly that I found helped on my journey, was having advocates and allies who are able to really drive that important message of inclusion and be willing to stand up and challenge it as well. Visibility is key. Definitely for me personally, it's the reason why I'm so visible, which sometimes does present challenges, but it's really important for visibility, even if that's really simple, such as, lanyards, badges, pronoun badges, as we've already talked about. And I think celebrating inclusive events, calendar events as well. So there are so many fantastic events on the LGBT plus and specifically trans calendar that can be really celebrated and make people feel empowered and valued and part of an organisation. And I think it's really important as well to listen to and to play your part in uplifting trans voices. So, you know, so often we do feel like we're under attack in the media with legislation about our lives and what we're going through. So having people that are prepared to stand up and hear our voices and join in those debates and discussions to help us is really, really important. I think to acknowledge and understand how positive difference is. You know, difference is so important. We're all very unique individuals, and it's important to remember that. I read a quote recently about unity, not uniformity, must be our aim. And that really kind of resonated with me, because we can only really achieve unity through variety and diversity. So it's about remembering that we're all very unique and different, and that is going to make our organisation much richer and enjoyable to be part of as well.
Why do you think that transgender is like an easy target for some elements of the media? Because it pops up quite often, doesn't it?
It's constant, isn't it? It's relentless. And that's why I kind of included that tip about uplifting trans voices.
Yeah.
Because it's so important that people do reflect and get involved in those debates and discussions, just to provide some solidarity and some protection for us. Because, to be honest, I mean, I'm obviously all over social media because I've got to be with my business. Yeah. But sometimes it's really difficult when you can have a really positive article. I mean, I did an article for The Echo for their LGBT reporter, really great article, fantastic comments, and then obviously the TERFs, as they're referred to, got involved with it, and it just very quickly become very negative. And I just stood there, and I was about to go to a school to deliver some assemblies, and it just dropped my mood completely.
Yeah, I bet.
Where I just thought, why is this happening? You know, people referring to the fact that I'm a woman, I'll always be a woman, not a real man. Just this whole gender debate of, that trans and non-binary people can't exist because the biological sex that you're born as and with, that's who you are forever, and it just kind of excludes us from society and existence, really. I don't know. It seems to be, well, I was going to say it seems to be relentless at the moment, but it has been for some years now. I don't know why that is. I think a lot of it's fueled by a lack of understanding and education, which is why we need to drive that education. But then there are always going to be people that discriminate in some way, one way or another. And at the moment, I think because of a lot of the Gender Recognition Act and the reforms that Parliament have refused to bring about, it's just an easy option for reporters and journalists, isn't it?
Yeah.
To write an article and bring about a slur about it.
It's depressing.
It is, and it's really interesting actually, because I got contacted by the Scottish Parliament this week. They're just launching their trans and non-binary policy, and they want me to deliver some trans awareness for the launch of that. And I think it's really interesting because at the minute, obviously with the Gender Recognition Act and the Scottish Parliament in particular, there is a lot of negative publications, which obviously makes me realise this is why they're looking to say, no, look, we are inclusive. So at least sometimes people do something positive about the negatives.
Yeah, you're definitely an optimist, like you said right at the beginning. I can see that in you. Yeah.
You've got to be, because it is relentless, and I can understand why for some people it's off-putting, and particularly for young people, seeing such derogatory kind of publications and comments all the time. It must be so difficult
Yeah.
At least I've got a little bit of life experience on my side, where I've got now the resilience and the strength that I suppose 27 years of policing's given me. But not everybody's as strong as that. And
No, of course not.
it knocks people, and the journey's so difficult anyway. I mean, the suicide statistics tell you how difficult the journey is. But for me, I just I dust myself down, I pick myself up, and I get back on Twitter. And you know, because I know I'm an important person and role model for a lot of people, and if I stop doing it, there are not that many visible people like me that are prepared to put themselves out there. So I've got to keep doing it, and be that ambassador, really.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
to drive positive change. Got to be.
Brilliant. Thanks, Christian. Thanks for your time today. It's been great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Well, that was a great chat with Christian, wasn't it? One of the things he mentioned that I really liked when he was reflecting on his younger years and how he didn't really have the people around him to talk through some of the issues that he faced. And then that led him to want to create a space where people could open up about their gender. And then, therefore, he created a business mantra, which was discover, insight, and inspire. And I thought that was really powerful stuff.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really appreciated Christian's honesty in our conversation. I liked what he was saying, as you say, about how he was seeking to bring his lived experience to his work at GenderSpace. I know I found it really helpful to hear about Christian's experiences, and that will certainly inform my inclusive practice moving forward. After our recording, Christian was saying that he's using his lived experience to inform his teaching when he's co-delivering a lecture to third-year psychology students at our university. So again, he's supporting students' understanding of trans and non-binary lives. Well, if you'd like to take your thinking further, we've added some further resources to the website on a specific podcast reading list, which you can access at liverpool.ac.uk/the-academy/podcast. And for University of Liverpool colleagues, you can also find more information provided by the university's Equality and Diversity team about transgender awareness at www.liverpool.ac.uk/intranet/diversity-equality/transgender. Let us know what you thought about this episode. You can tweet us at LiveUniAcademy, and you can also find us at eLearnerMatt or at Alexandra_Owen on Twitter.
And we're really grateful for those who have taken the time to either rate or review our show in your podcast provider's app. So if you are an Apple user, please do take the time to review our show, as it really will help others find us. Bye for now.